This is First Updates Now Spotlight, Episode 4, recorded on February 2nd, 2016. Spotlight is brought to you by AnyMark. With great service and many items assembled in the USA, trust that AnyMark will be here for you and your robotics team needs. Check them out at anymark.com today. And by Audible. Get the new Cool or another audiobook for free with Audible's 30-day free trial at firstupdatesnow.com/audible. Welcome to Spotlight, where we interview interesting people from the FIRST community so you can be more informed and engaged. I'm Tyler Olds, and holy cow, Colin Foltz, we just keep on rolling here with Spotlight with some amazing guests after next amazing guest.
Well, Tyler, you got to give the people what they want, and the people want more fun.
Absolutely. Well, speaking about fun there, we do have an amazing guest joining us today. I'd like to introduce and welcome Mark Lawrence, who's a mentor on FRC1816, the Green Machine. He's also the Minnesota Regional Planning Committee Chairman, and if you didn't know, this year's past recipient of the Woodie Flowers Award at Championships. Welcome, Mark, to Spotlight.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me on.
So, Mark, would you be able to describe just a little bit of background on kind of how you first got involved in FIRST and just what got you really engaged and interested in the first place?
Actually, it's kind of an interesting story. I had just recently retired from a high-tech company, and some people may not know, but my sister was the operations director for the Upper Midwest for FIRST, which was her post-retirement job.
Susan, right?
Yeah, Susan,
yeah, she's awesome.
And I got a call from her one day, and she said, "Mark, there's somebody in your hometown that wants to have a team." So lo and behold, after a little bit of searching, we found out it was a junior in the high school. He and his buddies had seen an article about the program in a magazine, and I thought it'd be fun to go do it. So I said, "I've got time. Let's go figure it out." So at that time, there was some nice rookie grants for the Wisconsin Regional, and went down there. And had no idea how to build a robot, and built a really, really strong pushing robot. So totally defensive with a nice autonomous mode, and ended up getting picked by Wild Stang. Went to the World Championship in Atlanta, and I looked around and I went, "Holy cow, this is unbelievable. This is, like nothing you've ever seen before. And where's Minnesota in the picture?" And that was that. I was totally hooked at that point. And, here we are 11 years later, still building the program out in Minnesota.
So, Mark, we'll get into Minnesota and a little bit more of your background as we go on. But first, wanted to ask about the 2016 game Stronghold. How is the Green Machine conquering the challenge?
Yeah, actually, the more you get into the game, the harder it gets. We're building a pneumatic-tired tank drive system, very low. We've got an arm with a ball collecting and shooting mechanism on it. I think it's not too different than a lot of the designs. I think one of the things that we're discovering very quickly is how difficult it's going to be to keep these robots running over a long period of time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Number of matches. The defenses, aren't coming from the robots this year. They're really coming from the playing field. And it's, the kids keep saying, "Well, let's just go faster." And they sort of forget that F equals MA. So we end up with bits and pieces lying around, and go back and redesign and make it stronger. So Stronghold actually is a pretty apt name.
Yeah, no kidding. You really got to make a robust robot. And that's an interesting point that I think in our other shows we haven't covered enough is how are teams going to be durable enough to, after 100 matches or so, what are these robots going to look like after that period of time? And how are teams going to adapt and be modular enough for it? So, and Mark, you've spoken to a lot of teams, especially Minnesota, I'm assuming, right? You keep in touch with a lot of the teams that you have. What's the general impression amongst teams in Minnesota about what Stronghold is, and how are they reacting to it?
I think everybody really likes the game. It's a nice relief from last year's game. It's a task that it's going to be very hard to build a robot that can do all the things that you really want it to do. And it's challenging. We have a lot of rookie teams that I think will build small robots that can play defense and help get through the defenses. And they're all liking it. They're very engaged. I'm not hearing any grumbling like I heard last year with the game. Everybody's, anxious to get on the playing field and see how their robot competes.
I think there's something for everybody in this game, right? I think that's what makes it really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a recognition that even for teams that do scouting, scouting just isn't an alliance thing anymore. You now got to scout the alliances ahead of picking, and you've got to be ready to pick your defenses, and that could be crucial in some cases.
And one more thing for me to interject. Speaking about scouting, you do have a team that I know that in Minnesota, 2052 and Nightcrawler, I think that does have a app they typically do make public as well too. So I hope teams in Minnesota and all across FIRST, I hope you take a look at that and give it a shot and see if it's going to be compatible and good for your team.
Yep, and they're doing that again this year. So cool. And we'll be doing some seminars at our regional events about it. So I think it'll be a good thing.
That's very cool. So, Mark, you've been through, I think this is your 11th build season. So as we kind of round the corner and we're coming in the home stretch here last couple of weeks, what advice do you have for, the younger teams out there to keep on the momentum and to be successful and finish strong?
I think the biggest thing at, mid-season, testing out your robot right now and figuring out what you can and cannot do in the next 3 weeks. It's crucial to get your robot built, particularly in Minnesota, and we'll talk about this later because for the Minnesota teams, their first event qualifies them for the state championship. And, having a robot and going to their first competition with a robot that's functional and can do something well, even though it can't do everything, if you can do a few things well, it bodes, in this particular game, it bodes well for a high Alliance pick. So it's really assessing where you are with your build season, going back and making sure that you're testing the reliability of it so it does withstand all these matches, and whatever it's doing it well. So that's my biggest advice at this point.
And Mark, we really want to talk about the state competition that you guys have a little bit later on in the show too, because that's a very exciting thing that Minnesota has going on, and in a very not necessarily, well, it is pretty unique for FIRST, but something that every state should strive to, right?
Absolutely.
So we really want to dig a bit deeper into that as well too. One of the things I got to ask you, because you've been around in FIRST for a while now, as you mentioned, since around, it was 2006, right? 2006 season.
Yep.
So I remember when I was in high school, my high school years were 2001 through 2004. And even if you look at 2006, there were very, very, very few teams in Minnesota. I remember competing at the Midwest Regional at the time, and there was, 2 or 3 Minnesota teams at that time. So coming from when you first started in 2006 to where you are now, what was the experience for teams back then? What was your experience with teams back then compared to where you guys are at right now with over 200 teams?
Yeah, you're right. When we started in 2006, there had been, we call it the modern age, because actually teams like 8, 9, and 10 were Minnesota teams very, very early on, and they sort of disbanded in the late 90s. And then we sort of popped back up onto the scene in 2005 season with a team from Northfield, Shattuck St. Mary's, 1623. And they only competed for a couple of years, but it was, back to this, how do you grow the program? We started adding about 20 teams per year, and that's kind of what we've been averaging. We've had a few drop out. I think the biggest thing back then was we all recognized that we had to get a lot of knowledge from outside Minnesota, and that we all had to lean on each other's shoulders to figure out how to make robots better, how to compete better, and also how to grow the program more. I mean, I think there was an immediate recognition amongst a whole bunch of people in the state, both educational and business-wise, that this was a great opportunity for our students, and we wanted to make it go. So, at first it was, a core group of about 15 teams, and as we brought on new teams, that we'd assign rookies to those veteran teams, and they'd walk them through the beginning of the season and what is it all about, what's the kickoff, and what's the kit of parts, and what should a robot look like, and how fast should it move, and all those kind of things. And eventually, just kept doing more things with more teams, setting up trainings, for instance, and we still do that. Now we've gone from, a single training at the University of Minnesota for a whole day to 4 of them around the state for a whole day.
Oh, when you have over 200 teams, you got to do that, right?
Absolutely, because there's always new rookies, and there's always rookies on old teams. And it's a great way to jumpstart those kids into both culture, what do you have to do for the awards, and then all the technical things, pneumatics, electronics, drive systems, and it helps raise the level of play around the state. It's things like, that, Michigan's been around a long time, and they've got mentors scattered all over all the teams, and they've got all that sort of, I call it institutional knowledge of how the program works, how the robots work, what kind of mechanisms hold up, what kind of mechanisms don't hold up. So we've had to do that through just sheer training efforts. So it's really helped. And then, the other thing that we've done really well is setting up an infrastructure. We've got a lot of volunteers that help out and do these kind of things, and have the students' best interests at heart to make it work.
Absolutely.
So Mark, I think you and your team now are absolutely an inspiration to a lot of teams. When you started, were there teams that you looked to for inspiration, and what did you guys get, kind of learn from other teams when you were first starting out?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because there's multiple levels to it. The first level was, our first competition down in Wisconsin. Wildstang picked us. Wildstang didn't have to pick a rookie team, but they did. And, we complemented their alliance nicely, and it helped that we were the only one that could push them around the field. So that was good. But, what we got out of Wildstang was not so much how to build a robot, but for those that know Al and Dottie Sirkowitz, they're 2 of the very senior mentors. Al's in charge of all the inspectors. They sort of took us under their wing and said, this is how FIRST works, and these are the kinds of things you do. So that was one level. And then there was, what do you do at a competition level? So teams like 93 out of Appleton, New Apple Corps.
My alma mater, yeah.
Yep, they would show up at our events and bring in basically a hardware store and help everybody with all the parts that they didn't come with, and the machining and everything else that was needed to continue to have the robot play during the events. And and then you got times like 525, Swart Dogs that build a very, very solid robot every year. And the kids would crawl over that robot, trying to figure out how it works. And then it just goes down the line. A lot of Wisconsin teams, like More Robotics. Lately it's been Wave, because you guys come and and beat us up, and everybody goes, well, how do they do that?
We like to be friendly visitors. So.
So it's been, so that's been good. And then there's a whole nother level, and Colin sort of represents this, and Mark Coors. The Mark, for those that don't know, Mark Coors is the Mark in Andy Mark. And, they would come and help us run the events. And it's amazing the knowledge that they would bring with them in running the events. I could spend, or somebody else could spend 10 minutes with Mark Coors and learn more about robots than they could in a whole season. And they would take advantage of it. I can just an anecdotal story. I can remember a team member coming up to Mark, because he knew he was from Andy Mark. And, after Fashion found that out, and he said, well, my wheel broke. And Mark started reciting all it would take to have that wheel break. And, finally the kid kind of backed off, recognizing that it was probably another problem that wasn't.
What, do you want a refund or something, or what?
Well, that's kind of, it was kind of digging at Mark that, this is a bad product kind of thing. And it was really the application of the product that caused the fault. So, but it's those kind of learning opportunities, having a number of people come in from outstate and bringing that knowledge with them and sharing it. That's, really, really helped a lot of teams. So.
One of the things that just popped in my head when you were talking about when you were getting inspiration from Wildstang and how they picked you the first year, I just imagine, I remember Raul, the coach of Wildstang, I just had this vision in my head. If you don't know who Raul was an absolutely amazing coach, but a very, let's say, active coach during a match. And I can just imagine him just giving you guys directions, and
Oh yeah.
that being a very motivating experience that you might have had. So,
Well, we had a
but,
very simple robot, so he didn't need to give us
yeah.
a lot of directions.
But and
You
I
know?
got to give kudos to you. You mentioned Alan Dottie Skirkowitz to me have been huge mentors for myself and for Wave Robotics as well too. And they absolutely do. They reach out everywhere and anywhere to help out anybody they can. And what an amazing reach they've had through their span and first as well too, and many more years to come, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's hard to go to an event in the Midwest and not know Alan Dottie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
I mean,
Mark,
there's a reason why Al got Volunteer of the Year a couple of years ago.
right?
So
Yeah, and that's a great thing to mention too, that he did receive them. That was a very very touching moment as well to see. So Mark, I remember a few years back, you and I were talking in Minneapolis, and just to mention a little bit about maybe about 1816 and experience that you have gone through on a team level as well too, that maybe other teams have experienced as well too. That 1816 the Green Machine was having some issues garnering support in the school and even in the community in general. Would you mind kind of discussing a little bit about that backstory and how 1816 is going through those hardships and excelling right now to even expand more than what their reach is currently?
sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that because I think it's, the light at this sort, as they say, is at the end of the tunnel right now.
Mm-hmm.
We started out building our first robot, this one that we went to the Wisconsin Regional with. Actually, in the kid who started the team, Chris Miller, his basement, and his dad's kitchen. So it was that kind of start. There was really no place for us in the school. They were doing some construction the next year, so we had to find an outside place to build our robot. So we had a community member donate an unheated warehouse to us. So that was an interesting build.
Unheated in Minnesota, huh?
Unheated in Minnesota. Yep, we still have blue fingers and toes from frostbite. Grabbing a metal tool at 40 degrees is pretty cold. So and then it was time to move into the school. We'd had a couple of successful years, and they had just done a big renovation of the high school, and there was really no place for us to build. And fortunately, Lori Shimizu, who's our volunteer coordinator and one of our lead mentors, and also a first senior mentor, sort of sweet talked the theater group into letting us use some of their space. Their son was very involved in theater and lighting, as well as one of the founding members of the team, and got the space for us to use. And we're still there today. The nice thing is through a lot of outreach efforts in the community. We got Project Lead the Way started back in 2009. We've moved that up now to about 9 different sections of Project Lead the Way, both in middle school and high school. And the community recently passed a new bond referendum that's going to basically take all these 1970s schools and refurb them and bring them up to 2015, 2016 standards. And out of that, they're going to add on to the high school, and we're actually going to get a build space.
Congratulations.
We probably won't get in there until 2018, but at least, like I said, the light is at the end of the tunnel. So we've made a lot of progress in the community. I think they realize that all kids aren't going to be lawyers and businessmen and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, I think it's been pretty impactful. And we get a lot of kudos for helping get the bond referendum passed, because the community now recognizes the need to have students trained in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And it's a good thing. We're pretty excited about it.
Well, that's awesome to hear. The path that 1816 has gone through, and I think there are many teams who can relate to something like that, of not having the resources that they need and not having the support that they need to finding ways to get past that. And there's many different vehicles and avenues you can take for that. But it's really cool to see you guys have a plan moving forward, and that 1816 is going to continue to prosper and be a very inspirational team.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get some tools.
Yeah, that's the next step,
we have
right?
more than a hacksaw robot.
Well, before we get into further discussion with the Minnesota Regional Planning Committee Chair and 2015 Woodie Flowers Championship Award winner Mark Lawrence, let's take a break to thank our sponsor for Spotlight, and that's Andy Mark. This week, we want to talk about a new and extremely helpful product to teams, and that's called the sensor screen. If you haven't seen this, check it out. The sensor screen is valuable when you have an unknown issue with your robot and you suspect a sensor functionality issue. This 9-volt handheld diagnostic tool helps you figure out what sensor issues are going on within your robot. The sensor screen works with many different sensors that you'll be using on your robot with a removable and updatable SD card. More sensors are going to be added as they come along. If you haven't seen the lunch with Andy, they mentioned that in there as well, so check that out. There's also a PWM reader mode, an RPM mode, and even a very elegant flashlight with a dimmable feature. Go ahead and check it out under the new products or by searching for the sensor screen on the Andy Mark website. So head on over to andymark.com, check out all their amazing products that they have for FRC teams. Don't forget about their Tuesday deals. If you're watching live, it's Tuesday. They got some great deals going on there. And we'd like to thank Andy Mark for their support of the First Update Now shows. Thank you, Andy Mark.
All right, we are back with Mark Lawrence. So, Mark, can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration or the spark that led to this explosive growth that we've seen in Minnesota over the last 10 years, especially kind of in the more rural areas of the state?
Yeah, like a lot of other Midwest states, we've got one big metropolitan area, and then we've got basically a tourism and farming and light manufacturing external environment. There's some mining up on the north part of Minnesota, but that's, hit and miss. It's in a big downturn right now with lots of layoffs and things, so it's not a very economically viable region, but we still manage to have teams. And the reason for that is it's for people that don't know Structure First. One of the things that you typically have is something called an executive advisory board. We're fortunate to have some very, very powerful players on that executive advisory board. The kind of executives that can pick up the phone and say, I'm doing this, you need to do that. Matter of fact, that's how we first got started. Dr. Osterly was head of R&D at Medtronic, and a couple of our parents work for his organization. And they went to him and said, these kids have won this contest in Wisconsin. They need some money to go play in Atlanta. And he said, okay, I'll give you that money. And very shortly after that, we made
That's simple, huh?
It gets better. It turns out that we made this connection between he and Dean Kamen, because Medtronic's in the medical products business and Dean Kamen's in the medical products business. And Dean basically shamed Dr. Osterly into the following year paying for 6 more teams. He said, you've got one team, you got them to the championship. Now, here's go fund some more teams. You got to get on the program here. So Dr. Osterly picked up the phone. He called across town to what then was Guidant, is now part of Boston Scientific. He said, I'm doing 6 teams. You got to do 6 teams. So I sort of chartered our team with going and finding 12 teams. Well, we ended up finding 15 teams the next year. But that then became the model, that they would go find money and we'd go find teams. So, pretty soon we hired Ken Rosen, who's now the regional director, through a grant from the Medtronic Foundation, to actually be the sales guy. So what he's been able to do, and I often tell people, if you want to know a principal or a superintendent in the state, go ask Ken Rosen, because he knows them all. And he knocks on doors, writes letters, gets in his car, drives around the state, and tells them about the benefits of the program. So he's very aggressive at selling the program. My role as the planning committee director is to get them trained, to get competitions for them to play in, and make sure that nobody fails. So, it's sort of this combination of having this really good executive advisory board that'll find funding for, events and teams, and then, the planning committee that we put together and making sure that the events all run well has, been really nice. And then I think the other thing that added, and we'll talk about this in a little while, particularly outstate, was joining up with the Minnesota State High School League, because they are now selling the program for us. So when they meet with athletic directors, activity directors, superintendents, they're talking about robotics just like they're talking about football, baseball, and all the other sports and competitions. So those kind of combinations, and then word of mouth. As you kind of hit a tipping point, and people want to be part of the program. And I think that's kind of what's happened. We've had a lot of press and visibility for our events, and that has really garnered the interest, particularly in the outstate regions, to join up and have the program in their schools. So.
How are those the rural areas that you have? And I guess understand starting a team is one thing. How are they sustaining though over an extended period of time? Because you still got to get that money from somewhere year after year.
Yep.
So how are those teams that are out in those more outstate rural areas? How are they actually sustaining themselves year after year?
So back to the executive advisory board. I mean, we actually have companies like Pentair that makes water filter systems, funding outstate teams. So that's nice. We can almost go to a team and guarantee them that we'll get their entry fee. So then you sort of need all the rest of the money, and it's amazing how the communities have gotten behind these teams. particularly when we end up with a rookie all-star, and they need to get the money to go to the championship, and I got lots of great stories about how they get money. One team actually hooked up with their dealership, and for every person they could bring in for a test drive of a car, they'd get $25. And then another one did when the rookie all-star, it was a very short window for them to get money to go to, at that time it was Atlanta. They did a spaghetti feed, and they earned $6,000. They actually had more people at the spaghetti feed than were in their town.
Wow.
So it's, word of mouth. The communities rally, and, a lot of it's in-kind donations. They'll go to a shop, a small manufacturing shop or something like that, and get, aluminum and chain and materials like that, and they just make it work. So, it's the old adage, if there's a will, there's a way, and they seem to do it. And we give them help when we need to, but they typically find a way to make it work. So, and a lot of them are small schools. I mean, we'll have a school with 200 students, and they'll have 25 kids on the team.
Wow, and that's
awesome.
an amazing rate on that too. And when you have over 200 teams, some of them have to be small areas, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Maybe building on that too, and not just an FRC, but can you describe the relationship between the different FIRST programs in the state? Do they help each other? Do they build upon each other?
Oh,
How does that all work?
That's a good question. Okay, so there was actually the longest sustaining organization is High Tech Kids. So they run Lego League. For those that don't know Minnesota, High Tech Kids is actually the largest single partner for Lego League in the United States. They had 630 teams this year, mostly concentrated in Rochester, the metro area, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth.
So you said 630 teams?
630 teams. Yeah.
Wow.
Way back, I got to think when this was. Whenever FTC started, one of my planning committee members sort of volunteered. His name was Joe Passaferro. He was part of 2169 King Tech to start up First Tech Challenge. So my team started a team and had a great success with it. The next year he said, okay, we got to put this organization together. And he said, okay, King Tech will, have a couple teams. I said, well, I can find you some more teams. And, it's the whole do the kickoff, and then the next year do a competition and that kind of thing. So Joe retired from the program a couple of years ago, so we moved First Tech Challenge over to High Tech Kids. So High Tech Kids now has Lego League Junior, First Lego League, and First Tech Challenge under their wings. And we get along very well. We run a lot of events for them. They try and host them where there's good FRC support. We do demos, and they vice versa. When we have events, they bring FTC teams and FLL teams to our events. Last year, we actually had a Junior Lego League Expo at the State High School Championship. So we got a lot of visibility to the program through that. Hit the kids at an earlier age, get them hooked on the big robots, and they'll grow up with the program. So,
Mike, if you don't mind me asking on what is High Tech Kids? Like, is it a nonprofit organization?
It's a nonprofit organization. And it was started solely for the purpose of doing STEM activities. They do FIRST, and they've got another program in the spring where they have a windmill contest. Can you build a windmill that produces X amount of power? kind of thing.
Hmm.
So they do a couple programs, but their main focus is clearly Lego League. As you can imagine, with that many teams, it's a lot of events over a very short period of time, and a lot of organizational issues to make all that happen. So,
Absolutely. So, Mark, being part of the planning committee for the entire state is obviously a huge undertaking as well. This year, Minnesota has 4 regionals running as double regionals, weeks 1 and week 6, Duluth week 1, and then Minneapolis week 6. What kind of led to the decision to run 4 events as 2 double events?
it's kind of having the lack of volunteers and the leverage we can get by doing 2 events in one weekend. In Minneapolis, the 2 events are across the street from each other, so we're actually in a basketball arena and a hockey arena. So we don't get a lot of leverage there, but we can do things like have only one VIP event. Having it on the same weekend, I mean, we can bring in a lot of resources, like show ready events, who helps us run the production, and a production company to do the AV. We can leverage those kind of resources. So that became pretty simple. And then when we decided to move to Duluth, it's a funny story. I'm a marathon runner, and Grandma's Marathon is one of the biggest events in the United States. And the runners take over the town of Duluth for a weekend in June every year. And it was always sort of, Ken Rosen's the same. He's an avid marathon runner. The 2 of us put our heads together and said, you know what? Let's do for robotics what they've done for running, and have the robot kids take over the town. So that led to the first event, and we're now, we have a double regional up there. We've got 123 teams competing under one roof. We put 2 fields on one hockey rink and a big, imported drape between it to block the sound, and away we go. And the fun thing about Duluth is we have what we call the double decker. It's a playoff between the 2 winning alliances. Winner takes all. It's just a lot of fun. And the nice thing about Duluth is all the hotels are within walking distance to the venue, and the students really do take over the town now. So that's been a great event. And being under one roof, we can leverage the volunteers that we have. And we can probably have 25-30% less volunteers. So.
And Mark, I say, from Wave Robotics, we've been to both Duluth and Minneapolis, and we're attending the North Star Regional this year in Minneapolis. And I got to give kudos to you and your crew just on how well the event is ran. And it's an amazing undertaking that you have. And I really got to speak for Duluth as well, too. I mean, if you haven't been to the city of Duluth, it is a winter wonderland. And I mean that in only the best way, that it's a gorgeous city. The hotels are, I mean, literally when we stayed there, it was a 2-block walk to the venue at the hotel we stayed at, right on the lake. And the event themselves, having that double decker, is an extremely cool experience. It reminds me a lot of championships, really, where you have they are very well separated. The fields are from between each other, but you have another few thousand people just right across from you. And one of the really cool things is there is a little bit of sound spill, which is both good and bad. But what's really cool about it is all of a sudden you hear all these people cheering from the background, and you're like, wait, are they cheering for something that happened on this field or that field? Then you run on over to check out what's going on the other field. And that was a really cool experience that I know we on Wave had at the Duluth Double Decker. And in Minneapolis, we've attended both the venues that has been hosted there, and they're both gorgeous venues. Last year, we attended North Star for the first time, and being in that ice hockey arena where there isn't a bad seat in the house because it's such a stadium view seating that you have for that. We had a lot of compliments from our members and parents who attended that on just what a cool view that is, and what a cool area University of Minnesota is, and the great support you guys get from them.
Yeah, it is. We have fun. We really do have fun. So.
Yeah, I volunteered at both sets of events as well, and had a great time every time I was there.
So speaking about events, and we kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but Minnesota also does have a state championship that's recognized as an official sport by the Minnesota State High School League, which is a phenomenal thing. It's something that, I don't know if any other state does it. Maybe you can correct me on that, at that level of recognition. But can you talk about how it got started and maybe provide some advice for other states that might be interested in pursuing a similar approach to that?
Sure, I'd love to talk about that. And there's also some great resources both on our website and on the First Inspires website now. So you can look those resources up, and they'll help guide you through some of that. As far as other states that are doing it, Connecticut's doing it, and Texas. Some of you may have just recently seen the announcement from Texas that they're going to start next year. So that's nice. Unfortunately, Arizona only did it 1 year, and it didn't work out the way they thought, so they've kind of dropped it now. But just to go back and sort of let people know what it is, within every state there's an organization that runs football and basketball and swimming, all the various sports championships, and those organizations are part of a bigger organization, as you can imagine, a national organization. And their role in life is to run these events and to keep the rules right, and make it a productive environment for the students to be in. One of the things that we've always said, we wanted to change the culture, and I said, okay, so how do you change the culture to get more recognition of STEM activities, and in particular robotics? So we started inviting the executive director of the Minnesota State High School League to our VIP events. And he came a couple of years. And then, he started actually really liking it. We'd have some discussions about the values of the program. And, by having students take him around the pits and experience the competition, he pretty quickly realized that the values we had were the values they wanted to promote. It's a very different competitive environment than, say, a football game or something. Mm-hmm. And we were lucky enough to have on Team Ice 3038 up in North Branch a woman named Becky Lure, who had been actually on the advisory board for the State High School League. And she said, well, Mark, I think we can do this. I know enough people, and you tell a good enough story that I think we can get through this and make this happen. So we actually approached the high school league and said, we'd really like to have a state championship, and we want you to sponsor it. Well, we ran into some roadblocks, as you can imagine. There was some pushback for some people, actually on both sides. Some of the mentors were afraid of the control.
Sure.
It might get exercised by the State High School League. You can't build on Sundays. You can't have sponsors. Kids can't switch schools unless they sit out a year. I mean, there's all those rules that are dictated by other sports. And we came to this agreement with the high school league that if you were on a first team, because they already knew, at that point we had 150 teams or something, they knew we had a very successful program and everything was running fine, so why mess with it? So they actually created a position for us, and they're called the presenting sponsor. And the nice thing is we can work both sides of the fence. So when we don't want to behave by their rules, we say, well, we're behaving by first rules, and first rule says this is okay. You can have a professional mentor, that's not on the payroll of the school. So, so that, they recognize all that now. And then on the flip side of it, we can go to a school district and we can say, hey, look, we're part of the State High School League. You should pay for buses to go to Duluth, or you should pay for buses to go to Minneapolis, or you should pay for travel expenses to go to the World Championship, because you won your way there. Mm-hmm. And you should pay your teachers, just like you'd pay, a coach for a team. You should be paying your, the mentors that are employees of the school district, at the same rate that they are elsewhere. So that's worked out very, very well. I mentioned that we do qualifying. We use the district qualifying point model. And the difference being, because a lot of teams only play one regional event, it's the first regional event that you're in.
Sure. That's
how you accumulate your points. If you win Chairman's, you get an automatic in. We take the top 30 teams. We have a one-day event. Load in, get on the field, go through inspection Friday night, and then Saturday morning we go in. We play probably 9 rounds in one day with 30 teams. Wow. And do just a semifinal, final playoff at the end of the day, and it gets great press. I think as far as changing the culture, we're in fact doing that. Just as another anecdotal story, I got, unsolicited calls this year from a couple of sponsors that want to be part of the program.
That doesn't come along very often, folks.
I don't think that happens very often. So, to me, that's an indication that, we're getting out to the broader community, and it's through that association with the high school league, because they've been around. I think this is their 109th year. They're not going away. They're, as I often tell people, it's the gold medal seal of approval. When they support a program like that, it carries a lot of weight. The benefits to the kids, if they go to a regional and win, it doesn't mean a whole lot because there's no context for the other students at the school to understand it. But if they get to go to state, now all of a sudden it's pretty different. I was talking to one of the teams up in Duluth, and they do something they call run the halls. So when a team's going to the state championship, all the kids come out of the classrooms and the team gets to run the halls and everybody applauds. That's the kind of peer recognition that goes along with being part of the state tournament. And of course,
that's really interesting that state has, in this case, you think like I qualified for regionals, I'm going to the world championship, and that really doesn't mean a whole lot in context to a high school student, right? But you tell them state, and that's explosive. That's what they really can relate to. Absolutely.
And that's it's an incredible thing. It's really an incredible thing to watch that transition happen. And obviously it's very competitive, to get qualifying points to go to the state tournament and to be in the state tournament. And the teams that have won it have gotten all the pep fests and all the kudos that the football team gets and the basketball team gets because they won the state championship. It's a huge deal. So anybody that needs help, it's easy to get a hold of me. My name's plastered all over the DynaRobotics.com website or Minnesota First website, or the First Inspires website. I can help. And I'm glad to do calls. I'm doing a conference call on Friday with Missouri to see if we can't get those guys going. So I'd love to help.
Yeah, Mark mentioned that it's on the First Inspires website. If you go to firstinspires.org and search on the or click the spyglass there at the top and just search for varsity sport. I just did that, and it takes you right to the page, and it's got all the information there that Mark's talking about. So pretty easy to find with the search tool on the website.
Yeah, we've also got guides for lettering. I get that question quite a bit, even though a lot of times lettering isn't necessarily part of sanctioning from a high school league. From a statewide point of view, a lot of times it's left up to individual school districts who letters in what kind of programs. The other thing is we have a really nice patch that was designed by a student back in 2012 when we got this thing going. And, it goes on a letter jacket and it says
Cool.
FRC. So and there's the templates there and who you can order them from and all that kind of stuff. So it's a great program.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely, and it sounds like that's really had a huge impact just on the sustainability. FRC is not cheap, but just the ability to be tied in here. And we heard similar things from Glenn Lee about what they've been able to do in Hawaii to really tie in with the schools and the government and things like that has been a key to sustaining First.
Yeah, and you look at some of the other programs. Michigan, the governor kicked in a bunch of money for after-school STEM programs. And even now at the national level, for those that don't know, No Child Left Behind has been thrown out, and there's a new federal program called Every Student Succeeds. And as part of that, there's a provision in there for after-school STEM programs, and it's the old looks like a duck, walks like a duck, talks like a duck. And it was Senator Franken from Minnesota that put that amendment in to, now we just have to get it paid for. But at least the verbiage is in the law that they want to, at a national level, support programs like First. So I think we'll see some things happening with that in the very near future. So if we can get some government money into some of these programs, it will help broaden the reach. And particularly, we were talking earlier about outstate schools. That's what we're going after state money for, is to see if we can't, in fact, get some of the outstate schools funded through state programs. So, okay.
Cool, man. Yeah, I mean that's a lot of really good information, and maybe the kind of correlate to that too. How has being part of the Minnesota High School League affected the ability to sustain other first programs? Do you see a correlation with that? You mentioned that you have the Junior League at the state competition, right?
Yeah, I think what it's done is it's really raised the visibility of those programs. And now I think the biggest challenge we have is building the infrastructure to support, 1,000 or 1,500 Lego League teams, in the state, because those are the kind of numbers that we're talking about.
That's
So
crazy.
yeah, yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
But a problem that solves you right in the
It is.
future. So yeah.
That's absolutely true.
All right. So before we ask Mark about his experience receiving the Woodie Flowers Award and the vision that he has and that others might have for the future of First in Minnesota, let's take a break to thank Audible for their support of Spotlight as well. So get this, if you haven't seen, Audible is offering for all listeners of First Updates Now podcast shows an incredible deal that'll help support the show as well. So if you go over to our website, firstupdatesnow.com, if you head over, there's a little link on the bottom right hand of the page if you're on a computer that says support fund by downloading a free audiobook. Click on that and you can sign up for a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial if you're interested. Now, personally, I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones. I've watched every single episode that's been on HBO quite legally, yes, very legally that I've done that. But to be honest, I don't really have time to sit down and read books, that sort of thing. And so one of the things I've been using Audible for that I loved is I just started diving into the Game of Thrones book number 1. I think it's just called the Game of Thrones off the top of my head, but I've been listening to that for my commute every day to work, and it's an awesome addition to just hear that content read out loud to me, so I can get the full story and all the additional content that I might have missed on the show or that wasn't covered in the show. So if you want to support First Updates Now and get a free audiobook to listen to, go to firstupdatesnow.com/audible or click on that graphic that's right on our website and cancel anytime. Or if you love it, like I do, I think you'll stick around and continue on to your next adventure. So a huge thank you to audible.com for the support of First Updates Now and shows like Spotlight.
All right, we're back. So, Mark, let's talk a little bit more about you specifically and your experience being nominated for the Woodie Flowers Finalist Award leading up to the award at championships. So, you received the Woodie Flowers Finalist Award in 2009 at the Minnesota North Star Regional. Did you have any idea that you were nominated, that you would receive the award? And can you kind of describe the experience of what it was like to win, what it was like when your name was called?
Well, yeah, first of all, I had no idea that it was going to happen to me. I really looked at the people that were winning those awards, and I thought, what a great recognition for mentors, and what an interesting group of people, and look at how they're affecting all these kids. And I guess my team thought that I was deserving of that award and nominated me at the North Star Regional, and I won it. And quite frankly, it was pretty humbling to be part of that community and know what they've accomplished in the past and what they had done. And it was a very, very nice recognition for me to actually have that happen. So.
Well, let's move forward. I mean, it's an amazing honor, to get the finalist award. You have that, and between the time and championships in that time frame, let's talk about Minnesota. Minnesota has now grown to over 200 FRC teams, which is more. I know one of the things that you guys always promote and tout. Mark, are you still with us?
Yeah, just a video. Can you hear me?
Nope, that's fine. Yeah, we'll keep going. No problem.
I don't know why the video is off.
And one of the things, with the over 200 FRC teams, is that one of the things that you tout is that Minnesota has more FRC teams than it has varsity hockey programs, right?
That's correct. That happened a couple of years ago. In talking about getting press, even the governor, who's a big hockey fan, recognized that we had more robot teams than varsity hockey teams, and that kind of woke him up to the fact that hey, we were doing something really great. And if you can pull that off in a state like Minnesota, which is by nomenclature the state of hockey.
That's saying something.
That's a big deal. So again, we talked about how we sustained the growth. using the state high school league, using a very active executive advisory board, and having somebody going out and selling the program to other people. It seems that formula works, and I'd be happy to talk to people about it and how they can make that happen in their own environment. So it's been a good thing.
So then, Mark, this year your team qualifies for championships. You actually win both the Engineering Inspiration Award at your first event and then the Chairman's Award at your second event, which allowed your team to be there in St. Louis for the Woodie Flowers Award presentation. I mean, kind of going back to that, I kind of have heard pieces of the story, but I'd love to get it straight from your mouth. But kind of what led up to you receiving that award? Where were you? What was that whole experience like?
Okay, so I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah.
The first thing starts out with actually a real personal story, because I bailed out of last season 2 weeks into the build season and went to Australia and New Zealand for a trip with my wife. It's something that we'd promised we'd do for a long, long time. We're big tennis fans. We wanted to go to the Australian Open, which happens the end of January into the beginning of February. So we had to be down there at that period of time if we were really going to do that. So I got back the day they were bagging up the robot. So totally unaware that the nomination was going on. And like you mentioned, Colin, we did go down to the championship, and we went out in the quarterfinals, and we packed up the pit, and I was the person responsible for driving the trailer with the robot. And so people that haven't been in St. Louis, there actually is a parking lot across from the arena that has no markings or anything.
No, it doesn't.
And for people with trailers, it's pretty difficult to get in and out of there. So I decided I was going to, right before the award ceremony, I could make it out to our hotel, which is about 20 miles west of the arena, and take the trailer, dump it off, and come back and park in a normal parking spot instead of getting stuck in the trailer parking lot. Well, I got out there, and all of a sudden my phone started going off, and I didn't think much about it. I just done a seminar on state high school leagues, and one of the persons from Show Ready, who was assigned to actually find me, said, "Mark, there's somebody in the executive lounge that wants to talk to you about the event. Are you in the building?" I said, "No." I'm about 20 miles away. He said, "Well, when are you going to be back?" And I said, "Oh, I'll be back in time for the award ceremony and stuff." So, I kind of cleaned up and headed back, and I got to the building, and Ken said, "Well, he's not here now. He's down on the field. So you got to, here's a badge for Einstein." Which, for those of you who don't know, to get on the playing field during the event, you actually have to have a special badge, and it's a little square button with the picture of Einstein on it. So I thought, oh, this is cool. I'm going to take advantage of this. So I got to watch the playoffs and the finals from Einstein, which was I just sort of lounged in the back in the corner and all that stuff. And then, when they're announcing the award, I just went, "Oh, I've just been had." They sort of fixed this deal to get me on the field because, quite frankly, my team was up in the nosebleed section. It would have taken 10 minutes to walk down to the field, and I think they were running behind time at that point, so they were a little nervous. What happens if it takes 10 minutes to get them down out of the stands? So that was pretty amazing. I'm not really an emotional person, but it was pretty emotional. You look at the group of the Woodie Flowers Award winners, and it's a very, very elite set of people. I look at it as a recognition of all the great things that have happened in Minnesota with the program, and it rests on a lot of shoulders. It's nice to be able to contribute. And add to that group, and let my voice be heard on some of the direction and things I'd like to see happen, and some of the things I'd like not to see happen. So it's quite fun. It was really quite fun, and there's a constant reminder. I get to take the trophy around to different events, and it's a big, huge, heavy thing. So
yeah, people probably expect you to carry that around everywhere.
They absolutely do. They want their picture taken with it and all that fun kind of stuff. So it's it's kind of like the Stanley Cup. I get to carry it around for a year.
Very cool. And just like all things in first, no award comes without an extra ask. So what are some of the responsibilities that come with receiving this award?
Well, the probably the most visible responsibility is actually judging the WFFA award winners. So that's on this group. We get to see all the nominations. We split them up. So obviously I won't be doing anybody from Minnesota. Probably won't be doing anybody from the Upper Midwest. I'll pick some of the other geographies to go after and read the submissions from the students and help do the judging. So we have little groups of winners that do that. We also get together and consult with some people that everybody knows, Frank Merrick and Don Bosey. And, contrary to what people think, we have no say in the game. The game is the game design committee, and, we're not part of that. But things we look for is, how do we preserve the culture? How do we make that happen on a continual basis? And how can we influence it? And how do we celebrate mentors? And how do we celebrate WFFA winners? How do we make those people more visible? Because they're the people that are going to sustain the program. They're going to sustain the culture, and they're the ones that are going to bring about changes in their own geography and promote the program. So that's what we're looking to do.
Well, and I think one of those changes was the blue banners for Woodie Flowers finalists this year too, or this past year as well. So those are definitely cool things that are added in. Do you get a blue banner for the championship one?
I do.
That's
I do.
awesome. Or your team does, right? Yeah.
It'll be in our pit. Absolutely. Along with the big trophy.
Is it the scale, since that trophy is about 5 times bigger?
Same size. It's the same size. Yep.
Well, Mark, congratulations on an extremely well-deserved award. And I got to agree, Peter in our chat posted that you're understanding what you did. And I think you are a very humble person. And I know personally the immense impact you've had on not only the state of Minnesota, but all the other outreach that you've had across the states and even into other countries. So very well-deserved. And congratulations to you for that. What's in the store, or what's in the future bag right now for the first in Minnesota? What are the plans coming up in the next couple of years?
Yeah, probably one of the things that people want to talk about most is why isn't Minnesota in the district model? I think that's kind of the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And, I think I mentioned it earlier, trying to find volunteers, because we've grown so fast, we've, 1816 is the lowest numbered team. This is our 11th year, and it takes a long time for people giving back. It's hard to find volunteers out of the general community that are willing to put in the number of hours that are required to do some of the things we need at events and stuff. So our goal over the next few years is to continue to build our volunteer pool to get, people trained to be MCs. As you know, that's not an easy job.
No.
Game announcers, FTAs that Colin knows all too well. Trying to build up that kind of talent pool, because if we were to go to district model right now, we'd need 12 events right out of the chute. Which
at a minimum, right? Yeah.
Yeah, at a minimum, which in over a 6-week period of time is like a rock and roll road show. That's a pretty tough thing to pull off. So, we're working on it. We'd love to get there. Being in the schools, along with being part of the high school league, would really solidify our place in the community. And I think it would be a long part of going down the road of making this whole thing changing the culture. It's kind of the penultimate part of doing that. So we'll get there. But in the meantime, we're going to look at a couple more cities to do regional events. As you can imagine, we've got right now, and within the state, we only have 246 playing spots with 208 teams. We're really forcing teams to go out to other regional events.
Mm-hmm.
Iowa started a regional event this year. We're going to have another one in Wisconsin next year. It's just, we're going to continue to grow that until we can make the jump to something that looks like the district model.
Right now you have states like, our team coming from Wisconsin, we're playing in
Absolutely.
Minnesota as well. So that's even less spots potentially.
That's correct. That's correct. And North Dakota and Iowa,
Mm-hmm.
same kind of thing. So it really is the upper Midwest. And, we're going to try and support that.
An upper Midwest district for the future?
That might be fun.
Maybe.
That might be fun,
That's not that big of a region, is it?
No, I can get on board with that, though. That'd be awesome. So
it's just that little, 6.5 hour drive between here and Milwaukee.
That'll happen. I'm sure the people up in Escanaba, Michigan area are laughing at the probably 12-hour drive they have from the UP to mainland Michigan. But
they would love to go to Duluth too. So, I think by the time we get there, we'll have this inter-district playing model figured out and some of those kind of things. It will be it'll be a different climate. So that, and I think our growth engine right now is FTC. We've got 130 FTC teams in the state. I can easily see that growing to 500 in the next couple of years. Lots of the FRC teams are starting FTC teams, and some have a lot. Egan's got 10. Prior Lake, King Tech has like 12. We've got 7. I think it's going to be a big deal.
And that's a vision, right? I mean, talking about going to 500 FTC teams. Wow. I really, really hope to see that Minnesota is able to continue on their growth that they had in all FIRST programs. That's just an amazing vision that you have, Mark.
Thanks. Thanks. Well, we'll get it done.
Yeah, man. So we're running a little bit short on time, but I would like to take a couple questions we had submitted by teams. Specifically, we got a couple from teams from Wisconsin and from Minnesota. So do you mind fielding a couple questions, Mark?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first one comes from Ryan from FRC1816 CIS. He's in Becker, Minnesota.
Yep.
And he asked an interesting question that states, he says, what do you think needs to happen in order for Minnesota FIRST teams to become even more competitive than what they are right now?
One of the things I didn't mention that we're doing is we've formed these hubs. So all around the state. So it's groups of teams that get together and share technologies. They share playing fields and field elements, and sort of help each other out. Last year we were very, very successful with what we call our Southwest hub. So it's the Southwest metro area. Almost all the teams made it to the state championship. I think 6 of them made it to the world championship, and it was because we got together and compared notes and figured out how to build a better robot and how to build a better strategy. And I think that as we do more of that, the level of play will get more competitive, and we'll be able to pull that off. So I think that's the nature of where we're going, and it's just more experience. As I mentioned earlier, it's institutional knowledge. We need, you look at Becker, they've only been playing for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they're a pretty new team relative to, say, some of the Michigan teams and some of the East Coast teams and West Coast teams. So.
And I had a question. I want to get one more, actually from a mentor that's on our team, Waiverbox 2826. He asked an interesting question, and we kind of alluded to this a little bit beforehand, but I think it's really important to highlight is, what do you think is the biggest component to the massive and successful expansion in Minnesota in the past 10 years?
I think it's a combination of having money available to grow the program, and then having an organization to go after the schools and to push it pretty hard, to be able to sell the program. So it's that combination that has really made it the growth sustainable. So.
Very cool. Well, Mark, thank you so much for all your time that you had and being on Spotlight. Mark Lawrence is the chairman of the Minnesota Regional Planning Committee, mentor in 1816, the Green Machine, and recipient of the Woodie Flowers Award at Championships last year. Mark, thanks so much for being on. What do you have going on that's going on in Minnesota FIRST, and where can people find more about you or Minnesota FIRST?
Okay, I think what we've got going on is just continued growth, and once again, I'm going to emphasize the importance of the State High School League and what that has done to our profile within the state. Places to go. We mentioned First Inspires. mnfirst.org is our regional website, and then also dynarobotics.com. If you're looking for things on varsity lettering and team organization and some of that kind of stuff, you can go there also. So it's how do you grow these programs, to really be entrenched within the school systems, and we're trying everything we can do to make that happen. So.
Well, thanks again, Mark, for being on. And Colin Foltz, what's going on with you right now and with Indiana First?
We're just prepping for the district season. We also have 4 events to run, including our state championship at the end of April. So making sure we've got everything ready there to support our teams.
Yeah, Mark, they got districts. I mean, and they only have 40 teams, 40 some odd, right? So
that's right.
Yeah,
it's not that big of a jump. Come on
that's
now.
right. We'll just import some more volunteers from Indiana.
Yes.
Mark, your events are so good that I'm sure we could get some people up there.
Yeah. Well, we take all the help we can get.
And also a huge, big thank you to our producer, Nick Olson, working behind the scenes. Thanks a lot, Nick, for being on. And what's going on with you? And do you mind kind of talking about what's going on with Wave Robotics right now?
We got a lot going on at Wave, just like every season. Now that we're into week 4 here, we're starting to work on a lot of manufacturing, so that's probably going to take up most of our time. And then a lot of strategy meetings just to figure out the higher level play of Stronghold.
And one of the things I'll point out, too, is maybe a thing that we do at Wave that I think a lot of teams should look at, too, is we do a lot of networking with other teams. We probably have about upwards of 100 teams that we're in contact with at a certain point in time. So reach out, regardless if it's teams in your own community area. If you have teams from far away, teams that you aspire to, reach out and contact them, see what they're doing. And not every team's willing to share, but many teams are. And having that networking and building that network of teams can only grow your team and grow other teams as well, too. So Chat Nation, thank you so much for watching the show. And all we ask that if you like the show, tell others about it on Facebook, Twitter, or anywhere else you want to. Please don't forget to subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels under First Updates Now. And you can find us on iTunes or your favorite podcast program. This is going to help us grow and get even more involved in First, making First loud, getting the community engaged, and getting everybody to have fun. So thank you once again for tuning in. Our email address is firstupdatesnow.com. firstupdatesnow@gmail.com. You can catch Fun Network shows live weekly on Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Our next show will be Recap on next Tuesday the 9th. See you next time.